And, they talk about Rafi, and you should always listen to what she says. You don't want to argue with her. And she had told Rios that Picard was a speech maker when he goes off on his little thing. Rios is not surprised. The next scene, we have Rafi Googling and drinking. She's looking up things on her internet, and we assume that she's doing some of her research. She has these notifications come up, and there's one that's a location called Free Cloud. So I thought before we got to the end and find out for sure that she had found Bruce Maddox. Of course, she could have been doing something else, but after Free Cloud pops up on her screen, then you see like what looks sort of like an ad for a casino or something, like dice rolling and stuff like that. It's like, oh, is it a planet of casinos, or is it just happened to be one? But that pops up, and so she swipes it away. It's just like, this is probably going to come up later. So then we go back to Rios' ship. He's in his quarters, and he's reading a book. It had been sitting in the chair that Picard sat in, and it was The Tragic Sense of Life by Miguel de Unamu. Rebecca, how do you say that?
I think it's Miguel de Unamuno.
Okay.
or no, you actually know what? Unamano. That's probably the correct pronunciation.
I just like how you say things. Spanish things. So then, of course, the MH appears with the Irish accent, so that's exciting. And he lets Rios know that the navigational sensors are back at maximum range, and something about something scraped off easily. It's like, what?
Here's what's interesting about this scene is it can get a little confusing because it seems as though Rios keeps calling him the EMH, but he's actually the ENH, Emergency Navigational Hologram. So I don't know. This is something new. We haven't seen this before, to my knowledge, in Trek. So I don't know if it's like separate personalities within the same hologram program, because there are different accents involved.
That's what I was going to say, is that maybe that's why there's different accents, because they do different things.
Yeah, if you have the closed captioning on when you watch the episode, he does say ENH. That's what the closed captioning says. So it is different than the EMH. So I thought that was kind of interesting, that how he has different holograms to help him do different functions on the ship.
And they all look like him, and he's just annoyed by them all.
Yeah, I kind of like that. I hadn't noticed that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's like a real subtle detail. And, and of course, like, with, the different accents and stuff, as you mentioned before, Brooke, with him growing up in London, it would be easy for him to, or the actor, I should say, to really kind of play into those accents. You have like the British one be the doctor and the Irish one be the navigational one. And maybe we'll see even more. Maybe we'll see more holograms with different accents as we go along.
Yes, I know. That's what I was hoping. And he starts to bicker back and forth with the ENH because he asks him if he's excited or intimidated or like starstruck because Jean-Luc Picard is around, and he gives like this resume of Jean-Luc Picard. He's saved Earth from the Borg, and he worked with Spock, and he's the guy with the Klingons that I can't remember what he's called.
The Arbiter or something?
Yes.
Yeah. That was
the Arbiter of
Succession.
Yes, that's it. The Arbiter of Succession, because he said Savior of Earth, and then something else. He said something else that he is. The ENH was going on and on about him, and Rios is just like, no, trying to ignore him. But then he's just like, I've lost somebody, I've lost the captain or whatever he said, and he's just like, and I just don't want to. I just saw him dying, and I just don't want to deal with that anymore. He's just. Like finally it's like, oh look, he's not always too cool. He's had bad stuff happen in his life, and he's sad emo boy inside. He tells the ENH to just like deactivate because he's annoyed with him, and he's like, there's not any more navigational emergencies, get out of here. And so then he goes back to just relaxing in his chair, and we end the scene with him looking out his skylight at the stars, which are the same stars apparently, that Picard is looking at from outside of Chateau Picard, which is the next scene. Laris comes out and she stands beside him. We see that he's holding a backpack, so he's going to be going soon. And he talks about the harvest and that it's got certain smells around this time and all this stuff. And she's like, "You're not going to miss any of this at all, are you?" And then we find out that he says that he'll miss her and Jabon and, of course, number one, are you not going to miss your dog, right? But he never really felt like he was at home at the chateau, Like, he grew up there, but it's not really his place. And I feel like that about, like, where I grew up, I didn't want to stay in my little tiny hometown.
I think it also makes a lot of sense for Picard's character. He always talks about France and the vineyard and, like, the idea of going back, but, now that he did go back, he's changed. He's not the same person. Now that he's there, he doesn't feel at home at it. And so I think it makes a lot of sense for this brewing discontentment that he's been feeling.
Mm-hmm. In the episode Family from The Next Generation, he went back, but it had been 20 years since he'd been there. So he had never met his sister-in-law, but he talked to her, they'd communicated with each other, space mail and such, but he's never actually met them or his nephew or anything. It's like, 20 years is a long time not to go back home.
Mm-hmm.
And even though he's lived here for 14 years, it's still not his thing. So after that, they just sort of stand there in silence looking at the stars together, and it fades to black. Then when we come back, it's Ramda drawing her cards, and Soji and Hugh are watching her. She pulls one out that Soji says looks like a door, and Hugh calls it happenin. And Soji then finishes what he's saying and says that it means false door, because apparently Romulans had a false door in the front, and then you'd have to go around to the back of the house or whatever to get there. That was like a traditional house. I don't know. Like, I thought it was kind of interesting, because I'm like, oh, where I always lived, we never went in the front door. But it was an actual door.
I mean, how many people actually use the front door? Like, it's always just kind of there for decoration.
That's kind of what I feel like.
Growing up, we always went to the back door,
right?
Or we opened the garage and went into the garage.
Right.
No one used the front door.
Right. So I guess you could always just make the front door an actual false door.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Hugh calls her a know-it-all because, she was not sure what this was, and then all of a sudden she knows everything. we see how this happens to her a lot, because she still doesn't know that she's a synth. So this makes her decide that she's going to move a chair behind Ramda, and she says to her in Romulan, if certain people requested entry, would they be granted? And Ramda flips over to their card or two, and she allows Soji to sit down. She goes, "You may sit." And I don't know why. I just, it made me chuckle for some reason. Maybe because I just like to mimic people. Anyway, so we go back to Picard's house. Zubon comes in from the kitchen. He's got a bag. It's got some bread, cheese, plum, something from somebody that wasn't made from a replicator that I wasn't exactly sure what it was, but it was very French sounding. He wants him to take it for the road, which I thought was cute to say for the road. It's like he's going into space, you guys. And so behind them, a lamp kind of explodes, and you realize, oh, that was like a phaser or something. And then some of the Tall's Yard operative guys come in, and there's a big shootout in Picard's living room or study or somewhere, wherever they're at, the dining room. And
shootout at Picard.
Yes, Chateau Picard. Yes. Zubon had said, oh, they must have killed the security, because we know that they have cameras and alarms and all that kind of stuff, because they couldn't tell that Daj had left whenever she left. But they all kind of take their places to try to get the jump on these guys. Zubon grabs a wine bottle that he hits somebody over the head with. Loris grabs a knife off the table and stabs somebody in the arm with it. Picard picks up his cane and beats somebody with it. It's like they're just using whatever they've got, and it's like, oh, hey, that's pretty good. And then they keep fighting. You see that there's phasers and things hidden places in case something like this happens. So like under the tables and in the bookshelf and all that kind of stuff. So then they actually get to pull those out and use them, and they think they got everybody either like dead or stunned or whatever, and another guy comes in the door, and it's just like, oh no. And then he gets shot. In through the door behind him comes Dr. Girardi, and she's got one of their great big disruptors, and she shot him, and she's like, maybe I had it on stun? No, dear, you didn't. They don't have a stun option. You know, she's come and she sort of saved the day, I guess, but...
Convenient timing.
Yes, convenient timing that she shows up. So, you know, we might have things to say about that. So she kind of puts it down on the ground after they're like, oh, there's no stun setting. She's like, oh, you know. So they take the helmet off on a guy that they've got tied to a chair. He's been knocked out. He's Romulan. He's got the, like, ridges on his forehead. I guess I never really paid enough attention that Zhaban has a little bit of ridges on his head, because we had talked about it's not like the next generation ridges. It's not like, hey, look at these eyebrow forehead ridges or whatever. It's like, oh, you got a little line there. They find out, of course, he's Romulan, because duh. They've disarmed all of them, and they've moved like everyone into a pile. So like if they're dead or stunned or whatever, they're just sort of in a pile over to one side, and then all of their disruptors and stuff are lined up on a wall, which I thought was kind of funny. Picard grabs a glass of wine and takes it to Dr. Girardi. She tells him that she met with, I always want to say Commander, but that's not what she is. Commodore, yes. That she met with Commodore O, and about how she told her about, like, her meeting with Picard. You know, she thought it was important to tell O about the stuff because security matters, kind of thing. And, you know, and she tells Picard that she's a terrible liar anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered. So in my notes, I wrote, could she be lying now and then just laying it on thick, being like, oh, I'm a terrible liar, to cover up the fact that she's lying? Or maybe she's supposed to, like, pretend that she's there and gonna help him, and she's working with O, and then she's supposed to double cross him, but then she turns out to not, or she does anyway, or whatever. And then for some reason I got it in my head, like, maybe she's actually a synth herself and she can't lie because of that. So I've got lots of ideas. Not all of them my own. What do you ladies think?
Same. I have a lot of ideas about Dr. Girardi. I also saw that, like, she might be a synth and there might be a twin of her out there somewhere. I think that's a little
Oh, no, I didn't see that, but yeah.
But I think with her, like, we have this scene where she shows up kind of randomly, says, I can't lie. And then later on, I know we're jumping ahead real quick, but, like, there's that scene where it's, oh, do we not have to do security clearance? Narratively, we're supposed to believe that something's off with her. I don't know what it is yet. Star Trek loves the cliche.
So one of the things that we saw in the trailer, or if you ladies remember, in the trailer, or one of them that we, for this show, there is a scene of Dr. Girardi, and we see her face, but we see somebody from the back, and it looks as if they are putting their hands on her face in a Vulcan mind meld formation. I would say my 2 cents here would be what we did not see in that scene, but what we will probably see later on in some kind of a...
They were outside. In the trailer, they were outside and like...
Oh.
And I think Dr. Girardi was wearing the same clothes, or at least the same colored top. So I think what we will see in a flashback at some point is that Commodore O mind melded with her and either extracted everything that she needed, but I also think that Commodore O may have placed in Dr. Girardi's mind to be a sleeper agent, or to be like a double agent, I should say. So I think that she sent her to Picard to join his mission, which she may have wanted to do on her own anyway, but I think that she now is a double agent. She may not even be aware that she's a double agent. Like, this could have been placed in her mind by Commodore O, and now she'll be spying on Picard and reporting back. I think that that's what happened in that meeting.
I like that. Because, whenever she met with Picard, she's just like, that's crazy. You're crazy. Why is that's not possible, kind of thing. So she would have been interested in this, but maybe not enough to actually